All right, good morning, everybody. All right, let's go back in time a little bit. 1970, MUFON published their first Symposium report. Who was around then? You can't hear me? Okay, we'll do, all right, is that better? Okay. 1970, MUFON published their first Symposium report from the 69 Symposium. In there, they included some statistics about patterns from the thousands of sightings that had already been collected by Walt Anderson and the folks. And so it'd be things like what month were most UFO sightings seen in, that kind of stuff. One of the statistics they included in this report was number one most reported alien being. Anybody want to guess what it was? The little grays, absolutely right. Number two most reported alien being. Take a guess. What? Nope. Absolutely human in every way. Completely human alien. Yes, Nordics, right. Okay. Anybody want to guess what number three was? No. Bigfoot. Bigfoot, honest to God. The bugs and the lizards hadn't showed up yet. I mean, they were actually in this category like fifth that was kind of other, which included blobs and all kinds of crazy stuff. Okay. But honest to God, now most of the time we don't put these two phenomena together, UFOs and Bigfoot. However, in 1970, I'm telling you, number three most reported alien being was Bigfoot creatures. Okay, there is obviously a connection. All right, our next presenter has a background in anthropology, psychology, conservation, and holistic health. He is a holistic health consultant, master herbalist, and master dowser. He has taught anthropology at North Adams State College and dowsing and psychic development at the Wisconsin Society for Psychic Research. He has meticulously researched the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomenon for the last 55 years and is considered a world authority on the subject. He's also a social scientist and both a Sasquatch and ET contactee. He has traveled extensively throughout the world to study and experience the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomenon firsthand. That's hard to say. Just trust me on that. In 1979, he had an experience that would forever change him. He was simultaneously, telepathically contacted by a Bigfoot and an ET. The contact triggered the development of psychic ability overnight, which also triggered a spiritual transformation in him. He has been a guest on over 420 radio and television talk shows. He has been featured in 23 books and is often featured in the international press, including various newspapers. Some of the publications you might have read about him in are Australia's People and Post Magazine, Omni Magazine, Magical Blend, Cryptozoology Journal, Wildfire, Fate, Argosy, UFO Magazine, Health Consciousness, and many others. In 1991, he was on a panel of scientists on a 2-hour Bigfoot documentary on national television. Plus, he has appeared on the Discovery Channel twice. He has lectured and presented papers throughout the United States on 70 different occasions. Please welcome me in bringing Kewaunee Lapseritis.
Thank you, Forrest. Nice to be here today. Going to be talking about basically the evidence, the overwhelming evidence for a Bigfoot UFO connection. I want to give a brief history, sort of an overview. These are basically are reported to be ape-like creatures that are 7 to 10 feet tall. Some have been reported 12 and 15 feet. One contactee in Missouri saw one that was 15 to 16 feet tall. And, excuse me, when the tracks were measured, perfect tracks that were 28 inches long and 11 inches across the toes. So these beings are very gigantic. Now, they've been reported all over the United States and basically all over North America, Central America, and South America. There's really many different kinds of beings that are in our forests that we know very little about because they're interdimensional. They have access to other realms. And though these Sasquatch look like an animal, they are 100 times more evolved than we are. They are more human than we are. They don't go around murdering each other. They don't start wars, and they don't destroy the environment that sustains them. Again, they're more human than we are. They're very compassionate, very loving beings, but also very protective. They've been wounded and shot at so many times that they just stay clear of us. We're a very violent race. There's another being that people get confused with the Sasquatch people, and that is the Ancient Ones. Now, the Sasquatch have a peaked head. Anthropologists call this a sagittal crest, where the Ancient Ones have a round head like us. The Sasquatch arms go all the way down to their knees. However, the Ancient Ones are in proportion to their bodies like ours is. However, the Ancient Ones have a human face, very human. Some of the women are very beautiful. They could easily win Miss America. People don't understand because they haven't been close to them, but even in Russia, for example, where the phenomenon is as well, there's been reports way back, documented, woodcutters going out into the forest back in the 16 and 1700s and being approached by a beautiful woman. And these were the Ancient Ones with a human face. Then there's the Guardians. Now, the Guardians have a wolf-like face. Some people call them the dog-face people. They look vicious to look at, but they're very kind. However, any of these beings you don't want to point a gun at or try to harm in any way because they will protect themselves. But these beings are very loving, but if there's one standing here, he's 6 to 7 foot tall and looks almost like a werewolf. So these beings, where they're from and what they do at this point, I don't know. But they are the guardians. There's portals all over the United States in different areas, and they enter these portals to go to a parallel world. And the guardians guard the portals so that no other beings can come through, especially if they're negative. And there's the good, the bad, and the indifferent everywhere in the universe. So there are beings that don't want any information out. They don't like it because they don't want to see, they don't want the public at large to expand and broaden their perspective of what's out there. Then there's the Stick Indians. I'm least familiar with them. However, they told me that this summer they wanted to introduce me to several different beings, including the Stick Indians. So they're a very slender beings, and I know, again, basically nothing about them. So the demographics of this is that they're in all 50 states. They've been reported, again, all through the North American continent. But there's also 12 of them in Kauai and 6 of them in Maui. So you may say, well, how did they get there? They were dropped off by a spaceship. When there's areas that have been overdeveloped and where there's a clan or a family of Sasquatch, they often come and remove them and bring them to a different area that's safer. So they were brought there. Now, throughout the Pacific, in the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, Japan, Java, New Zealand, Australia, all these have their Sasquatch types. Now, I was told back in July of 1985 that there are 7 different races of their people all over the world. Some are 3 to 3.5 feet tall. Some are 5 to 5.5 feet tall. and then some 6 to 7, and so on, and until you reach the true giants. So these have been reported and told the indigenous peoples of the world, and in this country, the First Nations people, and scientists simply relegate it to folklore, that it's just a fantasy kind of thing. We really didn't learn from people. We had a superiority complex, the white Europeans that came, and they thought they knew it all. And here, the Pilgrims, the first winter, about a third of them died, and they were raiding Indian gardens because they didn't know how to grow vegetables. They didn't know how to survive, and the Indians helped them. But they were told about these beings, and if you go back to newspapers in the late 1800s and very early 1900s, for example, in Massachusetts, Ohio, New Hampshire, Maine, Indiana, Pennsylvania, many of these places, I've gone through the old records, and it would say something like, John Smith and George Jones saw the wild man while hunting up on Wildcat Ridge or something, and then they'd give an explanation and say, well, it's probably that old trapper that used to come around and he went wild and grew hair. Now these people were not educated, and that was their explanation. Now, we call them Sasquatch. I refer to them as the Sasquatch people because they are a people. And that's a Salish Indian name. And it's interesting because all over North America, no matter where you go, the tribes will have their own name for Sasquatch. The Ojibwe called them Bugwe Janini. And some of the tribes in Northern California, the Korak, call them the Oma. In the Dakotas, it's Rigaru. In Russia, it's the Almist. Also, they depends what part of Russia, the Kaptar. These have been reported again throughout history. And in China, they called them the Yurin. Now, also, if a person looked on a map, especially in the Pacific Northwest, and there's other regions of our country too, where they have names that you wonder where they got the names, like Devil's Lake. Why would they call it Devil's Lake? Or Devil's Mountain? Or Skookum Lake. Skookum's another name, Indian name for Sasquatch. So some of the Indian tribes fought with these beings. And so when they saw them, they were afraid, and they called them, they're a devil. And so hence we get these names still today. It's because these names wouldn't be there unless the Sasquatch were there. Now, most tribes viewed the Sasquatch people as cannibals, and some were, from a standpoint that the Indians were trying to kill them, so if they killed an Indian, why go out someplace for dinner when you can have it right here, I guess. So, fast food and all that you're familiar with. So, but other tribes view them as a big brother, that they would come to the people in time as a warning to let them know that there was something about to happen and that the tribe needed to focus on that in order to deal with the situation. Today, they told me 8 or 10 years ago that they were going to start coming out more and showing themselves and allow a few pictures to be taken, even though the pictures themselves aren't very good because they could be a person in a monkey suit. However, I've looked at many of these pictures. I'd say 50% of them are fake. and the other 50% are legitimate. However, you can't tell. You can't see the face very well, and you can't see any of that. So, but I know myself in looking that they 50% are authentic. Someone from Florida sent me several photographs of a Sasquatch, purported Sasquatch, that was taken from a trail cam. And he asked me to evaluate it, and I just couldn't stop laughing. You could see the guy's shoe, and the suit he had on, it didn't taper or anything. Anyway, it was very laughable. He probably wouldn't get any prizes on Halloween even. It was so bad. So they are supernatural beings. I don't really like that word because there's too many negative connotations, but they are interdimensional. When I studied shamanism with a shaman, her name was Kewaunee, woman of the northwest wind. She was a traditionalist. She spoke the Ojibwe language, but she also had a PhD in ethnobotany. So I studied with her for almost 2 years, and I went out to her island, out in a wilderness island in Lake Michigan. And she saw what she reported to me, a 12-foot Sasquatch on one of the islands. And as we were talking, I said, well, I'm glad there's no one that they're allowed to hunt on these islands. And she looked at me, and I said, well, I wouldn't want a Sasquatch to get shot. And she really looked at me sternly and said, how can you kill a spirit? Now, that was her rendition of the interdimensional aspects, because the word interdimensional wasn't passed down from any tribe or anything. It's a fairly recent word. So she saw them as spirit because, again, they can dematerialize and go into other dimensions. I've seen them twice dematerialize in front of me. I've had them walk up to me. I heard the walking, and I stood there talking with them telepathically, and there would be, you could see the leaves about 3 or 4 feet in front of me moving once in a while, and a stick was there, a small stick was moved, but when he moved his feet, and a few times he just went like that. And so, again, I heard him walk right up to me, and I was standing by my tent. So, all this, people talk about evidence for a Bigfoot UFO connection, but I'm going to start out with just some of the basics, just real briefly here. In October 20th, 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin took a movie picture of a Sasquatch in Bluff Creek, California. That made world headlines, and it's been in dispute ever since, still to this day. Even though when the Russians had the film for 6 years, and physical anthropologists and biomechanic experts watched the gait and everything, they could see the rippling muscles in the legs, and when it turned around, the female Sasquatch turned around, they could see the muscles in the back where they should be in all cases. Of course, we weren't able to produce anything on film, that is in the movies back then in 1967. So they did the same thing in this country, and they've seen that, and yet it's still disputed because our scientists want a body, and the Sasquatch aren't going to give up a body. They consider a body sacred and not to be cut up, dissected, and so on, and they just are totally against that. So they don't allow people to get too close to them because they don't trust us. Now, basically, all these other 99% of the researchers use a field methodology that's with lots of cameras, lots of trail cams, sometimes a .357 Magnum as a sidearm, and sometimes a rifle. Some of them want to shoot them. Right now it's not in vogue, so they will hide the rifle and tell you that they're not out to hunt them, but can they come onto your property where they've been seen? So this has happened many times, and some of these people got caught, and later when I was called out there, the people who own the ranch told me what happened, that they kicked the guy off the property. So my field methodology has been to go out with no cameras or guns and to meditate twice a day. I also pray for world peace. I don't belong to any religion or anything. I pick herbs. I am a master herbalist, and sometimes I fish and then telepath to them and just wait for them to come to me. And that's what happened. Now, over the years, I've collected all the physical evidence you could, hair samples, in all kinds of tracks. I have even a 20-inch long plaster of Paris cast, handprints, feces, vocalizations. I have photographs, I have film. Some of these are not the best, but they are there. Again, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm here just to share, because you can't prove it empirically. However, the evidence is so strong, not only for the existence of Sasquatch, but for a Bigfoot UFO connection. So we must look at the evidence because it's very profound. Now, a man named Dr. Kenneth Sigismund, who is a forensic scientist, did all of my analysis, wherever I collected in the field early on. And he did work for the Secret Service and FBI and went to court and said, yes, this is what I found. He's an expert in the electron microscope, so he could focus in and look at every little detail of hair or fiber or anything like that. So I went the route of, as a social scientist that I am, and followed the empirical model as far as I could carry it. And I did this subjectively, and it led me to a Bigfoot UFO connection. So many of the researchers discard this information because they want to appear scientific. But wait a minute, if you subjectively throw away data, there's nothing scientific about that at all. And that's what a majority of these people are doing. And of course, they point a crooked finger at me, saying that I'm ruining the research. I'm tainting it with psychic phenomena and saying there's ETs and UFOs involved. And it's just the opposite. They're the ones that are tainting it with what they're doing and some of the foolishness on TV and so on in their monster hunting. So I'm totally against that. I want to change the image of the Sasquatch people, because they are a people and they're wonderful. They've changed my life, and I've been interacting with them for 36 years now, and a total of 58 years I've been doing the research. Now, I'll get into a little bit with my story. In September 1979 in Wisconsin, at the time, Native American people invited me to a farm 60 miles north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. One of them had purchased an old farmhouse, and they wanted to bless the land. So at the time that this happened, I was assistant director of an urban Indian agency. I was working part-time as a hypnotherapist, and I had been lecturing at the Medical College of Wisconsin. So I was ill-prepared for what was about to happen to me. The First Nations people were sitting around discussing the property and so on, and I was there, and I decided to wander off on my own. And when I did, a voice said to me, I am a Sasquatch man, and I am here watching you. I've been watching you for many years now. And I looked around, and I didn't see anything, and I was stunned by this, and I thought I was just hearing things. So he kept repeating himself, and I was standing, and I thought, this is ridiculous, but I thought, well, if I walked away, maybe 50 feet, all that would go away, I'd never experienced anything like it, and I didn't know how to handle it. I wasn't afraid, I just was confused. So all of a sudden, this sophisticated voice said, I am a star person. I also been watching you for many years, longer than you know or understand right now. I do understand now, but at the time I didn't. And I said, I wonder where he is. And I'm looking around like this, and every time I thought something, he would answer me, and in my mind. And he said, right now, he said, I'm invisible and I'm above you in a UFO, as you people call it. And so I, again, didn't know how to handle it. And I thought, well, I'm going to go back to where all the Indians are sitting around so maybe all this will go away. And when I kind of slowly snuck in and sat down, and there were 6 people there, one of them pointed and said to the head of house that just purchased the land, he said, well, you should build your sweat lodge over there. That's an excellent place. And he said, no, I will not build it there. And then the medicine man spoke up and said, no, I think it's an excellent place. You should build your sweat lodge there. And once again, the head of house said, no, I will not build it there. The star people have been landing their spaceships there, and I don't want to disrupt their activity. So I stood up and headed for the house on my own, and I had to sit and think this thing through. And so I was sitting at a picnic table there outside, and soon after I left, they came behind me, and the head of house came up to me and said, he said, animals are attracted to you. And I looked at him, I said, what do you mean? He said, my best friend can't get near my guard dog, and you were hugging him early on. He said, I've never seen that. And then he looked at me and said, and Sasquatch is also attracted to you. So I knew something was happening on the property, and I got permission and started to camp out there and interact with them more. But the most unusual thing that happened was 2 days later, in the middle of the night, it was 2:45 in the morning, a voice said to me, wake up, my friend, we are here. And it woke me up. Really, it's interesting, every time they do that, I'm wide awake instantly. And I thought, I was facing the wall, I thought that a burglar had broken in and he was being funny and saying, hey, wake up, my friend. But I could feel this energy behind me. And when I turned around, there were 2 Sasquatch standing there in the form of living apparitions. So I could see every movement of their pupils and their eyes, the wrinkles on their face. If they moved or smiled, I could see the wrinkles. One of them floated down through the floor so he would be even with my face, and we talked. And they started to visit me periodically that way, in which they've done over the years well over 1,000 times, coming to me and talking to me. Sometime in a car, sometime on a plane. It doesn't make any difference. I could be talking to someone that I met in a store, and they'd be there interdimensionally and saying, you should help this person. They have this problem, and I know that you can help them. And so I start talking to the person more, and all of a sudden they start to open up and say, oh yeah, I'm going through this, or I could counsel them just briefly and put things in perspective for them, which is one of my jobs, one of the things that I do here in helping people. So I contacted Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and I was very much surprised when he called me back personally and said, yeah, I'd like to come out and visit you. And he was in Chicago, and it's 90 miles to Milwaukee. So he said, I'd like to meet you and talk to you about this. So we had a 4.5-hour meeting, and I explained everything to him, what had happened. And he said, I'm not that surprised. And he said that on radar, they could see a spaceship moving along, then all of a sudden it completely disappears. and he called it the Cheshire Cat effect. You know, like in Alice in Wonderland, how the cat appeared and then disappeared kind of thing. So I thought he'd have a problem with all this stuff. He had absolutely no problem. And we had 2 other meetings later, and we continued to be friends and associates as well until his death back in, I think it was 1986, I believe that was. Now, I met someone also in Milwaukee that was who's had several experiences there in Wisconsin, and he wanted to take me out to that area. So I went with him to this area and met the people that were having experiences, but they had sold the farm and moved into a town. And the farm actually had always a big garden, and they canned pickles a lot, so they had a big patch, you know, and one of the chapters I have is called Sasquatch in the Pickle Patch. So they took pictures of the Sasquatch. I don't think they had very good cameras, and twice a spaceship landed right beside their house while this was going on. So they would watch them in the evening. There were 5 Sasquatch would come in, and they would pick their pickles or their cucumbers. So after that, they started planting more rows every year to compensate so they could have, you know, more food, which was really nice. So while I was there, I had an encounter with the Sasquatch that same weekend, and he told me that he said on Wednesday evening between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock. How he knew that, I don't know, but they're really intelligent beyond anything you can dream up. So don't be fooled by their appearance. So he said a spaceship will be dropping off one of my people. And so he let me know. Well, I thought about that later and said, well, gee, I have to go back to Milwaukee, and it's, I think it was 250 miles, and, you know, I've got to work. So the people that I had met and befriended, I said to them, don't tell anyone now, and because I'll be back, you know, maybe in a week or 2. And they agreed they wouldn't tell anyone. They told everyone, neighbors, friends, and it ended up to be a real bonanza of information. There were 2 carloads of 11 people driving the back roads, one following the other, between 11 and 1. They was going around a small bend where there was a field, and all 11 people saw the spaceship sitting there, and it immediately rose up slowly and then disappeared straight up in the air. When the second car pulled in behind the first car, their headlights went into the field, and there was a 9 to 10 foot Sasquatch walking into the woods. I interviewed all 11 witnesses, those all separately, and they all told the same story. Once again, 11 witnesses, it's hard to say, oh, that didn't happen. Now, later I moved to Oregon and was doing research in Oregon, and they started talking to me there. Wherever I went, they followed me, and they'd show up. And the ETs the same way. So I was leaving to visit a friend for a weekend. He has a 1,000-acre ranch in the middle of the wilderness, and it was 35 miles away. Just as I got to the edge of my driveway, an ET said to me, we're above you in a ship, and we're going to be following you on this trip. And I just thanked them and said, fine. But on the trip, I had to go through where there were cliffs, and there's no railings, and it's a single lane dirt road, very treacherous. And I've been down that road dozens and dozens of times. And in fact, it's a beautiful ride. But when you're going through the cliffs, you have to go real slow, 15, 20 miles an hour. Well, there were big potholes there, and the county decided to fill them in, but they filled them in with smooth rocks that they got from somewhere closer to the ocean, and they were as big, and sometimes a little bigger than a golf ball, and they filled in these holes. Well, I'm driving down, and there's a hairpin turn, and I started gently pumping my brakes, but I'm speeding up as I'm pumping the brakes. And I got nervous real quick because in the hairpin turn, there's just a 60-foot drop. So I'm pumping harder, but I look at my speedometer and I'm going faster because the weight of the car at an angle going down on these rollers of rocks, it speeded up. And so when I got to the edge of the cliff, I had my elbow on an open car window, and all I said to myself is, I guess this is it. And I just went right off the cliff. But I hovered there. I just stayed right there, and I looked down and the cliff, and it slowly turned around and came back onto the road. They levitated the car, and when it came down so hard that I scraped the side of some boulders and stuff on the other side. But they saved my life. They saved my life numerous times. And I go through details of a lot of this and the different healings in my 2 books. So I'm very grateful for that. And I had heard stories, I had read them back in the 70s in some of the UFO magazines, but I had never connected Sasquatch with UFOs until I had that experience. So to this day, I do projects, work for both the Sasquatch people and representing them and the ETs, the friendly ETs. And there's many different ones. I've seen 7 different races of them. My wife, Kewaunee Lapseritis, she has seen 8 different races of them. And they come to her, and they also come to my 4.5-year-old son, and they talk to him. One evening, he was giggling and laughing, and he should have been sleeping, and it was way past his bedtime, and he had already been put to bed, and so Kelly slowly opened the door and peeked in to see what's going on, and there was a juvenile Sasquatch tickling his feet at the end of the bed. So she could see through him, again, a living apparition. And they have tremendous control when they astral project. And they've touched me in that state 5 different times. So they travel with me all the time. Incidentally, if this sounds like a science fiction movie, I feel like an actor in one. So this has been going on, and it's beautiful, and they themselves want to help the planet and help us because the planet's dying, and we're in big trouble, very, very big trouble. Now, another time, a spaceship followed me home, and I watched it. I stopped for gas in a little country store, and then I saw it hovering there, and then when I started again to head home, it was pacing me. So I arrived at home, and at the time, I was living at the base of a mountain, the very base of it, but it was a dog leg. It wasn't a pointed mountain. It was flat, and it went for several miles until it got into the Siskiyou coastal range. And this was just a dog leg from it, and I was right where the paws would be on the dog leg. So I pulled into my driveway and got out and looked, and it slowly was moving along, and I had been grocery shopping, and it was 10 minutes to 11 at night. I still remember. And I ran in the house and grabbed my zoom lens binoculars, and zoomed in just as the ship was hovering just right in front of me there, but on top of this mountain, and slowly watching it go down behind the trees, and you could still see the glow. So I went back in the house, put the groceries away. It was late, so I got undressed, and went to bed. As soon as I got into bed, I heard a thumping outside, of a heavy thumping, and a gate from a large man. And it stopped by my window, and then the next thing I knew, I could hear it walking through the kitchen, walking down the hallway towards me. And I said, "What? How did he get in? Everything's locked." Well, of course, I discovered they can walk through doors and walls as well, very easily. Just like ETs, well, they are ETs. They're terrestrial extraterrestrials. So it walked into my room, and I could see through him again. It was a living apparition, but he could affect the physical. Keep in mind, we are, in a sense, physical dense, where they are physical etheric. These are my words to help you to understand their form. Well, he stood there looking over me, smiling, and I turned and grabbed a blanket over my shoulder just for a split second, and he was gone. And when I looked towards the rest of the room, just as I looked, he sat on the bed, and the whole bed went, and it kind of startled me, and he laughed. And we talked briefly, and then he left. And when he left, about five or 10 seconds later, I heard the thumping of a large man leaving, because his body was outside, his physical body, when he walked up, but he used his astral body to come in and visit. So these things go on all the time, and to date, I have documented 309 people that have had these experiences, nowhere near as many as myself, but a few of them are ongoing, and they also do projects for these beings as a go-between, between their world and our world. Now, the famous abductee Betty Hill and I were very good friends, and she told me that some of the experiences she had with the Sasquatch, and how the state police would consult with her because they would see spaceships land, and then all of a sudden there were Sasquatch walking around everywhere. And they started to associate the two, and she said, of course, that's real, that's what it is, but many people are in denial, or they feel that it's just too fantastic to want to believe. Keep in mind, I went from the first time in 1979, when all this started, for 2 years I was in and out of denial. I just didn't buy it, hook, line, and sinker. I 1 minute believed in it because they were coming to me, and then as I thought of it and started to analyze and go back to the empirical model and try to figure this thing out, I thought, well, maybe it didn't happen, that kind of thing. But then before I knew it was happening again. So for 2 years, I finally accepted it. I had enough experiences, and however, I did not know they wanted me that they would be with me for a lifetime, because, I thought, well, had my first experience, but I'll never tell anybody. Of course, it's gone all over the world now. Now, an Indian woman, a First Nations person with a master's degree, I interviewed for almost 5 hours. She was so upset about what had happened to her that she couldn't talk about it, and she finally could talk to me about it, and there's no one laughing or telling her she's crazy, because her live-in boyfriend used to get angry with her when she tried to discuss this and to kind of get it off her chest. And this is what she told me. There's a zone in South Dakota that the Indians know about that strange things happen. And she was driving on her way back to Minneapolis, where she was working, after visiting her family on the reservation, and she drove through this zone. When she did, she saw a spaceship land in front of her somewhere off the road. When she finally got close to where the spaceship had landed, there was a Sasquatch standing beside the road, and she could see the ship right there. And he said to her telepathically, "Pull over." She floored it, drove past him, and never did anything. She was just too scared. But he was right there, right beside the road. So, I continue to document this. I had a ruptured disc back in 1987, and I couldn't walk. I could not walk. So I thought in a chiropractic adjustment or something. I really didn't know what had happened to me. And the chiropractor said, "I'm not even going to touch you. I was on a scale of 1 to 10, my pain was at 10.5. And it was very difficult to deal with. He said, "You need to see a doctor right away." So I went to a doctor, and they sent me to a neurosurgeon. And he said, "Well, he wrote everything down, and he said, "Well, the surgery's set for Thursday." And I said, "Hold on." I said, "You didn't discuss it with me." I said, "I'm just not going to go under the knife just because you say so." I said, "That doesn't appeal to me." And he said, "I'll give you some painkillers." And he said, "But when you get through with those in a week," he said, "you'll be here begging me to operate." He said, "Because you'll never walk again unless you do." And I looked at him. I don't know why I said this. I looked at him and I said, "Doctor, you'll never see me again." And I wheeled myself out in the wheelchair. Well, I still didn't know what I was going to do. And so I was laying at home. Everybody was waiting on me. My friends and neighbors brought me food, did my laundry, checked on me all the time, because I was just flat on my back in bed. Just to sit was horrible. So I was getting about 4 hours sleep a night. Once in a while, 5. Just the pain was just so bad, I couldn't deal with it. So I was on a UFO flight line, I discovered. And the Sasquatch were coming up on my deck and visiting me periodically and that kind of thing. So I decided to telepath to them. So I did for the whole day, asking them to come and heal me. Nothing. So this went on, and finally another day or two, I was in bed telepathing, and then I just broke down and wept and wept. I was so frustrated, and I had so much pain, I just couldn't deal with it anymore. So I continued to do that, and that evening, as soon as I shut the lights off, 3.5-foot beings appeared. And I tried to turn around to look, and there they were, but I couldn't turn all the way around. And all they said to me, "My friend, we are here to heal you." And I said, "Thank you." I said, "Thank you, God bless you." And laid back, and bang, that's all I remember. The next thing I remember is strange talking. And somehow they were talking to each other telepathically, but it ended up in my head. And it sounded sort of like this. That's what it sounded like. So it woke me up, and I opened my eyes, and one was standing over me with some type of a cylindrical object. There was another one here, and one of them close to my bed. And I looked up, and I said, "Oh, it's only you guys. I love you." I said like that. I mean, what do you say to a beings? The highest adulation you could give anyone is "God bless you" and "I love you." God and love are synonymous. So that's what I said. Of course, they never asked me if I had insurance or anything, so. But the next morning, I woke up 10.5 hours later, feeling rested and zero pain. So I sat at the edge of the bed giggling for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I was praying and praying, thanking God over and over again. I just couldn't believe it. So I got up, walked to the bathroom, and walked around, and I felt a pressure on my lower spine. And I thought, well, maybe there's still some healing to go here. So that evening, when I went to bed, as soon as the light was shut off, they appeared. The three little guys appeared and said, we have one more healing session. And I said, oh, thank you, and come ahead. And I laid back. So the following morning, I was perfectly fine, no pressure or anything. Well, a couple of weeks went by, and back then they didn't have ATMs, and I wanted to go out of town to visit some friends. I was always going into the wilderness areas, and I lived at the edge of one. And so I had to go to the bank, and it was a Friday night, and I looked at my watch, and I said, holy gee, if I don't make it by 5 o'clock, I won't be able to draw any money out to go on my trip. So I quickly drove into town, parked the car, and started jogging down the street. And just as I got across from the bank, and it was 7 minutes to 5, the chiropractor was walking across the street. And he stops, and he was a young man, but he was completely bald, and his mouth was moving, and he kept doing this and pointing, but nothing ever come out. And all I said to him was, have a nice day, and I jogged across the street to the bank, and he still stood there looking at me. So, it's almost a miracle, but I feel so fortunate. I really feel fortunate that so many of these things have happened, and though I struggled through some of them, and to be healed is nice, but what I went through, to get there was horrendous. And I try to ask them many different questions and so on, and one time I asked one, I said, I try to keep it simple and not use any $50 words, and I said, are you the missing link that scientists talk about? He said, missing link? And I said, yeah, they talk about the caveman or missing link. And he started to chuckle. And I said, why are you laughing? And he said, no. He said, you people are the missing link. He says, you don't know where you've come from or where you're going. And it's true. It's true. There's so much to talk about here, but I'm leaving the last 20 minutes for a slideshow here. Yes, I was called in the middle of the night to a home in the wilderness when I was in Oregon, and the woman was dying. She had an asthmatic attack, and it was 4.5 days into it, and he went to the ER, acupressure, acupuncture, naturopathic stuff, homeopathy. They did everything, and couldn't take her out of it. So I only met these people once, and the woman was 30 years old, very vivacious and energetic and everything. And when I saw her, I got scared. I mean, she was just a living skeleton. Her eyes set deep into her head and real black eyes. And it was just scary. She could barely breathe. She was just trying to breathe. Well, when I got off the phone, this was 2:45 at night, I was driving there, and a Sasquatch said to me, I was listening in on the phone with you, and I'm going to follow you to this house. And I said, well, where are you? He says, I'm in a spaceship just above you with some of my people. And I said, I'm going to need your help on this one. I said, I'm afraid. He said, don't worry. He said, we will be there for you. So I arrived. I told the husband to stay out of the room, shut the door, and I had my medicine bag, and I built up my energy and did my shamanic thing. Excuse me. And as I was building up the energy, there were 3 Sasquatch and 2 ETs standing behind me in a semicircle, and they focused their energy right on me. So when I picked up the crystals and reached over to touch her chest, and just behind her neck, all this energy came through me as if it was electricity, as if I had touched something electrical. And all she did is have one sigh and started breathing normally. I mean, I found that hard to believe, and I was the conduit for this. So they did it. It was God and them that did it, not me. I was just the conduit. But I wish I could do that every time. But I did this for this woman, and God and I and the Star people and Sasquatch people saved her life. Well, I didn't see her for a whole year. And one day I was shopping in the health store, and I saw these 3 kids running around, and there she was with a carriage. And so we started talking, and I said to her, I said, incidentally, I said, how's your asthma? Because the husband told me she had 2 to 3 asthmatic attacks a month, and that was the worst she's ever seen. And she looked at me and said, I don't have asthma anymore. These things sometimes bring tears to my eyes. I have a lot of compassion for people, and I just, if I could help in any way, I do. And my experiences with these beings has been golden, and it's just completely have changed my life. In 2012, I had a brain tumor, and the Sasquatch told me the different herbs to take, so I started taking them. As I did, it was going very slow. So the ETs came and took me 6 times and dissolved the tumor. So once again, I was very fortunate for them. Nothing invasive or, chemo, radiation, and all the stuff that kills people. A doctor friend of mine had to fly down to Phoenix to do a 3-day seminar with another doctor and his assistant. And 10 o'clock at night, they got through on a Sunday, and they decided to go for a ride just to get away because they'd been closed in for 3 days doing this seminar. So they drove around, and they went off into the desert, and they found an area, and they pulled right off the road and parked right there in the desert and got out and sat there looking around. And because at night the stars are as clear as can be, and they just wanted to get out and get some air. So the woman actually had heart cancer. She had a tumor wrapped around her heart, and she was unable to be healed. And so when I found out about it, I asked the Sasquatch to heal her. And so while they were there sitting talking, the doctor said, "Oh, look, isn't that strange? What are those 2 people doing wandering around the desert at night like this?" And they were just sitting. And finally they said, "Gee, looks like they're coming our way." And finally, when they got close, he said, because I got both renditions from him and from his assistant, he said, "Oh my God, there's Sasquatch. Don't look, don't look." And he covered his eyes as if they're going to go away. People react in different ways. I mean, one Sasquatch, the Shaman Sasquatch, was 12 feet tall, and the way they knew is because it stood beside a saguaro cactus, so they knew exactly, or fairly exact how huge they were. And then there was just a little small one with him. He was 8 feet tall. But the 8-footer acted as a guard, and she told me that he knelt down, walked up to her, knelt down, and when the doctor said, "I don't know what they're doing here," and she said, "I bet you Kewaunee sent them." So the being said to her, "Kewaunee has sent us, but we need your permission first." She said, "Yes, you have my permission." And he just went right through her and held her heart, just like a psychic surgeon. So he did that and held that, and while that was happening, a evil ET appeared. And he said, "I cannot stay, I must leave." He said, or "I don't want anything to happen to me here." So there is this thing going on in space and around us and on this planet, and it has been for a while, in a sense, the good against evil. And there are evil ETs, but a majority of them are good. There's just 2 or 3 that are not, races that are not. So Anyway, this was all related to me later. So out of the 309 people that I have that had mental telepathy with the Sasquatch people, 17% of them also saw ETs or a ship land first, or they saw them dematerialize. I've seen them disappear in front of me twice. So that's interdimensionalism. If people don't like, if you're overly scientific and you don't like the word psychic because it's unscientific, when they need to go back to school and read because they've already proven that psychic phenomena is real, and all the information's there by scholars. I've talked to these people, I've interviewed them, and one was from MIT, another one from Princeton. And so if you don't like the word psychic, use the word quantum physics, because it's one and the same. It's synonymous. So we need to include anything psychic along with any other data and not discard it like the other researchers are doing. So the thing is, they have not progressed at all. They haven't gone anywhere with their research because they hit a dead end. They're too aggressive, and they're pushing them away. And now I don't go anywhere. I mean, I can go in the forest, and I moved from the Seattle area into eastern Washington last September, and in August, when I found a house to live, they told me to go up into the forest to a particular place. And we drove up there, my wife and I, and there were 3 Sasquatch there. So anyway, they interact with us all the time. And, you know, some people or scientists still are not that impressed with some of this data, but, you know, William James said, and I quote, "It takes only one white crow to prove that all crows are not black." And analogously speaking, I have 309 white crows. How many more do I have to get to wake people up and make them aware that this is a real phenomenon? Now, they started to talk with my wife Kelly, the Sasquatch people, when she hiked in the Ozark Mountains. She's from the state of Arkansas here. And however, the ETs have been coming to her also for years. And she has produced 4 hybrid children. They told her this, and she knew this because of she felt a little invaded. She had been invaded somehow, but couldn't figure it out until they told her. And from her DNA, they produced 12 more hybrid children. So they sort of introduced us. I'm not going to say any more than that. We got married last July at a wilderness lake, and there were several hundred Sasquatch there. We didn't see a one, but interdimensionally, they didn't want to scare the other people. There were only 8 people at the wedding, but they were bumping into us, around us. The energy was starting to make me dizzy even. So they were everywhere. They were everywhere. And so Kelly is a major contactee, and she's writing her own book about these experiences. And her guide, a female Sasquatch named Suni, told her it was important because it shows how loving, caring, and compassionate they are. And they're not this monster stuff. This is ridiculous. Researchers are looking for an animal, a monster that does not exist. It's just in their fantasies, and it's just sad that they keep perpetuating this on film and monster movies and that kind of nonsense, because it really hurts the image. They've helped so many people. A woman was going back to Seattle on a Saturday night. This was about almost 40 years ago, and she was up in the hills visiting some friends for dinner. And on the way back, she had to relieve herself, and so she backed into an area that was like an old dirt road. And when she was through, she got in the car, but she had backed into a mud hole. So one of her back tires sunk all the way down to the bumper. So she took a blanket from the back of her car and put the seat down, locked the doors, and realized she couldn't go anywhere till the morning to find someone to help her. Well, before she could fall asleep, she heard the thumping of a large man, and he walked up, squatted way down, and stuck his face right in the window and looked at her, looked around, evaluated the situation, went over, picked up the back end of the car, and set it down on solid land and walked away. She drove home. So they can be very, very helpful. Okay, I'm going to start the slides here, and I'd like to say that a British journalist in the late 1940s asked Mahatma Gandhi, and he said, and I quote, "What do you think of Western civilization?" And Gandhi looked at him and said, and I quote, "I think it would be a good idea." And now the Sasquatch, the ancient ones, and the ETs are saying, I think it would be a good idea if we stop the warring, stop destruction of the planet, and start growing up emotionally and spiritually. Wendell Stevens, who's now passed on, was a friend of mine as well, and he said our technology has superseded our spiritual development, and that's precisely what's going on. People in this room are probably some of the most spiritual people around compared to many other, the rest of the population. So the planet's dying, and we are an endangered species, and we're in trouble, big trouble. Okay, this is myself right outside of Mount Adams Wilderness in 1999. I was living in a teepee there with Comanche, my black lab, who's now passed on, that he loved the Sasquatch, and he would talk to them. He wouldn't do anything that I suggested right while he was talking with them. And I could almost whisper to do this or that, and he would do it. So I know that they had a relationship. And after he died, the Sasquatch said, "We sent him to you because we knew you'd go through some hard times and that he would be a good companion." But he was more than that. He was a teacher because he started talking to me telepathically. It's hard to tell people that, but it's true. So, at any rate, I had this analyzed. This was found where I saw 3 times a spaceship land on the side of Mount Adams. But this was found by the Forest Service. So I went over there, got some samples, and I sent it to Dr. Kenneth Sigsman at the Medical College, Wisconsin, that did all my analysis. And when he put it under the electron microscope, it melted. So he said, "Geez, this isn't hair, this is fabric." So he went to a fabric expert who'd been doing this for 29 years and had it analyzed. And he has all the fabric that ever existed, and he couldn't match it up. And Dr. Sigsman never told him where he got it or the associations with it, anything. So when he got through analyzing it, the conservative scientist who analyzed this said, "It doesn't match up to anything. As far as I'm concerned, it's not from this planet." Now, these are here, they stack these rocks. When you're going into their territory, sometimes they break off trees up about 10 feet tall, and also they build these structures that are about 3 feet high, roughly. And several places I knew where they were at, though I had never been there before. And as soon as I arrived, these were right there at the edge of the forest. Okay, this is a crystal that Haloti, and that's her name. She's an ancient one with a human face. And this was in Oklahoma and Texas. I was in that region way back. And 2004, 5, and 6. And I'd leave gifts for her, organic almonds, organic walnuts, jars of honey, things like that. And we'd always get a gift in return. Now, Haloti, the ancient ones, have their own language. And the Sasquatch also have their own language. So this is, they can understand each other, she told me. Okay, this is a track. This was taken actually in Texas, right on the Oklahoma border, near Paris. And they were coming into this farmhouse. The people read my first book, contacted me, and then eventually invited me down. And I started to do research there, and because their garden was slowly dwindling. They were raiding the gardens, so now they befriended them, so they also make several rows of vegetables, and they ask them, what vegetables do you like? And so they plant it for them and tell them to come and help themselves. Yeah, I think that's just a small one, 13. I think it's from a female. It's about 12, 15 inches long. 12, 13 inches long, I mean. And that's my Bigfoot there. Okay, these are some herbs that Haloti left for me. My back was bothering me in the sense of sore. And so, because I've left so much for her, that gifts and things, that she left these and told me how to use them to make a tea. This is in Idaho. A researcher there invited me to come to explore a cave. And when you get down inside the cave, it's like a cathedral. It's incredible. But then it like a funnel, it tapers off at the other end. And then there's a big chamber. So the Sasquatch tracks inside in the dirt were there. The person had seen them many times. And so this was back in 2003 when I was exploring more. And now again, they come to me and I could, go camping and they'd be there anyway, no matter what. Okay, this is the island of Kauai in the Hawaiian Islands. And researchers will say, oh no, there's never been any reports from Hawaii. However, the Sasquatch say they go to the kahunas and to spiritual people there very selectively, that they know they're there, but they don't want to show themselves to anybody else. So I made arrangements ahead of time, and they told me which jungle to camp in. Now, the first 2 days I was in a hotel, and trying to figure out where to go because I didn't know the island, and why the second day there I was getting dressed, and I said, geez, I'm going to check the weather because I know that's up in the mountains sometimes at that time of the year that there'd be some rain. So I turned on the TV, and 6:45 in the morning, and I was kind of surprised. There was Harry and the Hendersons on. So I thought, oh, gee, that's a good omen, I like that. And but they did come to me there and visit me. And when I got back to the Seattle area, I said to them, I said, well, he said something about, did you enjoy your stay? I said, I did. I said, but I thought I'd have more interaction with them. And he said to me, well, what do you want us to do, get in a tent with you? They have a sense of humor, even though they're very sober-faced, they do have a sense of humor. So this is the area where they live. And the spaceships drop them off there. This is Tony Healy, He's the Yowie expert from Australia. He was visiting me after his second book came out, and so we discussed all of that. He knows, excuse me, about the Bigfoot UFO connection and the telepathy and stuff, but he stays conservative. He's open-minded, and he believes in what I'm saying, but now he's getting somewhat belatedly reports from people that the Yowies are talking to them, and they've been doing it right along, but it's a huge country, and there's not many researchers, so none of this, very little of it got out, or got back to him. This was taken in Oregon. This is a 17-inch track to the right, and that's a handprint. If you notice, it does not have an opposable thumb. It's almost like this is a fifth finger. So obviously they still have prehensile hands that can grasp things. So just to give you an idea, this was some of the things I collected early on. I really don't have very much interest in them now because of how we interact with them. I don't really care. Now, this is a track. This was taken in Texas. And matter of fact, they deliberately make tracks or walk in your direction if they know the soil is soft to give you a gift, or they'd step out and look at you or even wave. So that's a gift because they don't show themselves that much. So they left these tracks for me, and I try to, the gait was so long, it's between 4.5, 5, and sometimes 6 foot gait. There's no way a man could stretch like that. I tried, and I didn't want to go any further than that. But anyway, this is one of the perfect tracks. And now I should have had this changed from when I spoke in Virginia last week when I was there. But this green part here and this lower half was never there. So I don't have a clue where it came from, and I forgot that it was in here. But this was taken by a person that was hiking, 2 people, and he had a camera, and this was in the Santa Cruz Mountains in Colorado. And they thought there were elk coming through, and he picked up the camera, and before he could snap it, one about 5 feet tall ran from here to here. Then he snapped this one. This is an ancient one. This is not a Sasquatch. It's an ancient one. It's got a beard and so on. And as soon as he put the camera down, this is about 7.5, 8 feet tall. There's one about 10 feet tall that came right after that, and he missed it. He had the kind of camera, if he kept the shutter down, the button down, and just keep taking pictures, and he would have had some great pictures. Okay, now, this is at my place outside of Seattle. Does everyone see a female face right here? That's an ancient one. So this is right beside my cabin where I was living in the foothills, 50 miles from Seattle. And this is a gift that they gave. Now, this was taken by a contactee that was visiting me, and he's like a son to me, and we interact all the time. But this is a female ancient one. This one is a Sasquatch. There's a muzzle, one eye, the other eye here. This leaf or whatever it is they're coming is blocking his right eye. But there's his complete head. Again, his muzzle and his eyes. Nose is right there in the middle. And then down here is a guardian. The ones that look like a werewolf. The muzzle, there's a tip of his nose right there. And his small ears on each side. But they're 6 to 7 feet tall themselves. And he's right beside the portal of which they built. They told me to go there so they could work with me. And I was there 11 years. So anyway, these aren't the best pictures, but They told me that this summer they want to take me through one of the portals to a parallel world to live with them for a while, and then to come back and write my third book about it. Then they said the fourth book will be all photographs. So we'll see what develops from that. And but in the meantime, at least we have these. That's the close-up. Again, not a very good shot. There's the muzzle, the tip of his nose, one eye, the second eye, arms, and so forth. People see that? Okay, these are statues that were made by Dick Robinson, the creator of the Grizzly Adams series. And these were about 12 to 15 inches tall, and he was so impressed meeting them in the forest that he had had these made up. Now, they're completely nude, but the back side of them, they have a tail. It's a short tail, but they have tails, both of them. So these are like gnomes or some such thing. I really don't know. But there are gnomes, there are little people, many different races. They told me this. Five people I interviewed saw fairies. And one of them was a retired government official and his wife, and they invited me out to their place in the wilderness. And I stayed there for a week, and I saw 2 spaceships. I didn't have any Sasquatch experiences, but they took me to a little field right beside their cabin, and they said they were there 7 o'clock one evening, just walking through, and all of a sudden they saw what they thought were dragonflies, but they couldn't figure out where they were coming from. They came from a portal, and they were coming through the portal, streaming through, and they stood there, and all of a sudden one of them came right up to them and hovered right in their face. They said, "Oh my God, these are fairies, they're real beings." So they're all interdimensional. So when they say that none of these things are real, they're all real, every one of them. This is a mannequin by a man. Back then it cost him $15,000 to make. It probably cost 5 or 10 times that amount today. But that was 6.5 feet tall. The ones that he experienced when he was in Iowa looking for them and chasing them down. And they finally told him. He was sitting in his truck, and one went over the truck, and the window was down, and he reached in and picked him up off the thing and sent him back down gently, and he said, telepath to the guy and said, "Stop following us." So he was taking this around to the carnivals and fairs and stuff and showing it because it impressed him. It changed his life. Okay, that's another track. Now this one here, this is a woman in Idaho saw it crossing the stream, and right in midstream, she took the picture, but he dematerialized right in front of her. This is the rarest picture you could ever find because he's half physical and half non-physical. More of a close-up. Okay, this is Dmitry Bayanov, a colleague of mine in Russia. He works at the Darwin Museum in Moscow. Went to the Patterson film and did this rendition of the female's face so we'd have a better idea, and he did a superb job. This here is 24 inches long, and there's a man's foot right here, and it was cut in half, this. It was out of limestone down in Biloxi, Texas. This track is 65 million years old. The Sasquatch said they were there during the time of the dinosaurs. So there's dinosaur tracks beside these tracks. Either the dinosaur was following the Sasquatch or vice versa. And it ended in a slab of several tons, and then from the other side, it continued. But the scientists from the closest university would not go and look at it. They said it's all a fake. They've been carved out. to prove that, a man had a crane come down and lift that up, this big slab, and there's the tracks of the dinosaur and this track right beside it, leading to the other side. Impossible to ever have faked any of that. Science needs to start doing their job. It's shameful that they've just left this whole thing and have just left it to individuals to do. Okay, this is a fresco here from Europe. They're in France, Germany, England, and so on. This is an ancient one, human face, and yet he has hair all over his body. There's many of these. There's hundreds of them there because the Sasquatch are in Sweden, Norway, in the Pyrenees, in France and Spain, and in England, Scotland, and in Ireland, and also Romania. Romania has the largest wilderness area left in Europe, and there's lots of them there. It's a very rugged area. I went for the day into the Cascades back in 2003, and I asked them if they would appear so I could take pictures, and they did, and I got this picture. I wish it was closer, but at least it's a picture. Okay, this is taken from a film here, stepping over a fence. See the conical head that he has, and he's stepping over a barbed wire fence. So he was about 7 to 7.5 feet tall. This is a close-up. He has a corn cob in his mouth. He just came out of a garden with corn. This is from my book, the Sasquatch. This is an ancient one. Eagles, hawks, and ravens they use as sentinels. This is Andy Robson, who's a contactee. This is a mannequin in Newport, Oregon, and his guide, Oea, told him that a perfect rendition, that some of his people look very much like that. In fact, his book just came out, and it's very different than my books, and people can go to www.psychicsasquatch.com. And his book and many others of some of them will be there, and my website is www.sasquatchpeople.com. Now, this was taken by a man. You see the head and almost like it's a simian face. This was in the Bouchart's Gardens in Victoria on Vancouver Island. This was taken there. We've already been there. This is more tracks. This is a llama in eastern Tennessee. I spent 8 days there interacting with them. They braid. In Russia, they do it horses. They braid the horses here, and 2 of the llamas on their farm had braids from the Sasquatch. This is some of the writing that they do. Not all of them, just a few learn to print. And I would leave a tablet out with a flare pen. And they call me Dream Man. They said, not Kewaunee, they call me Dream Man, saying that I'm a visionary ahead of my time. And Pushoma is the chief of that particular tribe in Oklahoma. And he says, our people come here before time Athropus, that is us, the humans. God sent us here on ball of light in a spaceship. We build great cities of stone on these mounts. So all the effigy mounds that you see, and they found these giant skeletons, some of them are from real giants, the hairless giants, but many of them are from these ancient ones. Then he says, we're here to watch over what God has created. Nothing is new in your people create. Many times humans make machines and city, then make war and destroy, then start over. So they're on to us in what we do. Haloti wrote this. I asked her about interdimensionalism. She says you world, but she means your world, not same as our world. Your time, not same as our time. Your space, not same as our space. A thin cloth hang between these places. She said their places, but she means these places that open and shut, the portals. There is no I or me. We are all one. They always say we whenever they talk. Each one is a part of the whole. What one does, all do. The interconnectedness is so important. And incidentally, it's been proven scientifically now through the entanglement of molecules and so on that every one of us, the trees, animals, ETs, all of us are interconnected. I'm going to go on here. Okay, this is a being here, standing there. And this is a structure of often what the Sasquatch make. Okay, this was taken here in Arkansas by a woman, and she was seeing the Sasquatch and wanted to get a photo of him. So she heard it at night walking by her place. She ran out, and she could hear the thumping going by, but there was nothing visual. So she snapped the picture anyway, and she got an interdimensional Sasquatch. However, there's another one right here. The face, the mouth, nose, and eyes. And another one right here. That's the head, mouth, nose, and two eyes here. It's better in the actual picture, but the point is that they're interdimensional. And in a sense, I guess this is not just evidence, but proof that they are interdimensional. This one is a sketch. I should have got a shave and a haircut first, but I guess I forgot. These are some of the structures in Pennsylvania. I've seen these all over that they make. And this is the end of the slides, and here it is. The rendition reads, just as Dale entered the clearing and discovered standing together the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, and Jackie Onassis, his camera jammed. Well, our planet's dying, and the message is stop worrying, start seeking out your purpose here on a spiritual level. It has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with one's spirit. It has to do with becoming a better person. I continue to work on myself, but right now we've got Fukushima, the radiation there. 80% of the fish in the ocean are gone. They said there's going to be super quakes and super tsunamis. They said World War III has already started. They just haven't dropped the bombs yet. This is disgusting. They said to pray for them because they're trying to help the planet, and to pray for world peace, and to meditate daily. Sasquatch research is a heart-based research. It has nothing to do with the head. People think that, the more they figure it out, the more they'll know, but no, always from the heart. Whenever I'd get too intellectual with them, they'd say, little brother, get out of your head and back into your heart. And so it's that important. They also said, pray for your enemies, forgive them, and send them love. So these are important, so important right now, because the planet's dying and the world's slowly falling apart. And no doubt that this year, next year, the world economy is going to collapse. So we need to get closer to God, however you view he, she, or it. It's that important. I'll be signing books downstairs, and like I said, I've got, you can go to the Sasquatch, there's a lot of information still on the SasquatchPeople.com and the PsychicSasquatch.com. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.